Hi friends! Today we're talking about breed registries, making decisions based on performance data, livestock industry problems created by breeding for maximum production, and what you need to know before you decide if you should raise registered or unregistered goats. Let's get to it. Hey friends, welcome to the Get Goatwise podcast. Are you longing to raise goats and other animals for food but don't know where to start? Do you want to be more self-sufficient and less dependent on the grocery store? Do you wish you had a mentor to walk you through raising livestock? Hi, I'm Millie, animal scientist, cattle girl turned goat rancher, co-owner of Dry Creek Livestock, and simple living enthusiast. For 15 years, I've been on a mission to raise all of our own meat, eggs, and dairy. Here, we'll talk about raising goats and other homestead livestock, how to create sustainable animal management systems that actually work, and a bit of off-grid life with kids and livestock. If you're ready to take control of your food supply, raise livestock with confidence, and provide your family with the most nourishing meat, eggs, and dairy available, you're in the right place. Kick off your muck boots, pour a cup of coffee, and let's talk livestock. Hey friends! Let me tell you about a chart I use to tell kidding dates at a glance and plan breeding season based on when I want goats to kid. I have this chart glued on the back page of the family wall calendar, and I even print half-size versions and glue them into my record-keeping books. It's that handy. And I'd love to send it to you for free. If you've been around here very long, you know I have a goal to reach 100 reviews on Apple Podcasts by the time I publish episode 100. That's only 19 episodes away. So, if you head on over to Apple Podcasts, scroll down to ratings and reviews, tap the purple words, write a review, give me some stars, and write a quick thought, take a quick screenshot before you submit, and then email me the screenshot, I'll email you my kidding due date calculation chart. This is seriously one of the handiest charts around for planning your production schedule and knowing when to expect kids. So here's the short version. Go to Apple Podcasts, write a review, screenshot it, email it to me, and I'll send you the chart. Easy enough. My email is Millie, M-I-L-L-I-E, @getgoatwise.com. And if you've already left a review, thank you. You can either email me a screenshot of your review from the ratings and reviews section, or just send me the alias you used to write your review, and I'll get the chart emailed right to you. Your review helps more families discover the show, which means more people are taking control of their food supply, and that's what this is all about. Here's what's happening on the ranch this week. It's been freezing hard every night, into the low 20s, so the flies are pretty much history, and no one ever complains about flies being gone. We've had a couple of snowstorms, but nothing sticking yet, thank goodness. It's a pretty nice fall around here, crisp and cool, very little snow, so we're still able to get fence work done. The Weston A. Price Foundation event was fun and a huge learning experience. We cooked 48 pounds of goat meat, made Mexican-style birria and Greek gyros, and the response was fantastic. We gave out about 500 samples, and I think we only had 2 people say that they weren't sure about goat meat. Everyone else was shocked at how good it was. Sage had never been to such a fancy hotel before, so that was a fun experience for her. Our room was all the way up on the 25th floor, the meals were fantastic, and we are completely exhausted. I'm so happy to be back at the ranch, getting back into the groove of our regular life. That was our last vendor event for the year, and I'm grateful for the opportunities we've had this year, and also grateful that it's time to transition into winter work. In my travels, I've been listening to podcasts, and I just listened to one about registered versus unregistered goats. So I'd like to unpack that a little bit here and talk about registries, data, and how the data is used. First, let's define some terms. Registries are organizations, usually breed or type specific, that keep records on qualifying animals that are submitted for registration. They keep records for identification like name, scrapie ID, tattoo, microchip, and a photo, pedigree, genetics, ownership, confirmation, type-specific performance, for example, milk production for dairy goats, fiber production for Angora goats, and show records and titles. Not all registries record all of those things, and some record more, but that's the general idea. DNA testing to verify lineage is common and required for some levels of registration. So, why do registries exist? That depends on the registry. Most have a genetic improvement component. Some are very heavy on show records and awards, like the American Boar Goat Association and the American Dairy Goat Association, and a few exist specifically to preserve a breed, like the Spanish Goat Association and Kiko Registries. There are registries for nearly all animal species I'm aware of. I think there's a very important place for registries and for purebred seed stock producers. I also think they're not for everyone, nor should every animal be registered or even qualify for registration. Registries and data collection are not always one and the same, so I want to talk about performance data for a minute because it is an important part of many registries. This is a little bit of a rabbit hole, but stay with me, it's important. I love data, so looking through expected progeny differences, or EPDs, on cattle and performance data on goats is fun. But I also think that sometimes that data collection and comparison cause the selection for production traits to trend in an unsustainable direction. Let's go through a couple examples to illustrate that. Look at the genetic situation we're in with dairy cattle, especially Holsteins. They track everything, which isn't bad, but when we use that information to genetically seek extreme production, it will eventually backfire. We're now breeding Holstein cows that produce over 28,000 pounds of milk per 305-day lactation. That's a 60% increase from 1980 to 2020. At the same time breeders were seeking maximum milk production, the productive life of the cow dropped 17%. Today, Holsteins will average 2.5 to 3 lactations, while in 1970 the average was 3 to 3.5. Why? The extreme level of production created a whole mess of metabolic problems, and their bodies couldn't handle the demands, so fertility dropped, which resulted in cows that didn't cycle or conceive, and that means no more milk from those cows. I will say that much of the industry realized they hit a wall genetically and recently started refocusing on health, fertility, and longevity traits because what they were doing was not sustainable. There's a whole other aspect of diet and nutrition that could be talked about here, but in a nutshell, we've selected for an animal that outproduces its ability to eat enough to maintain that level of production. So the diet gets hotter and hotter, meaning more grains and concentrates to try to meet those needs, which then compromises the rumen, further reducing the cow's ability to absorb enough nutrients to meet the production demands she's genetically capable of, and ultimately shortening her life. Since the data collection on dairy goats has not been around as long, the historical baseline numbers for production are not as reliable and probably inflate the increase in milk production over the years. However, it is fairly clear that the production trend for goats is similar to dairy cows, but hopefully won't go as extreme. I'm not in any way saying that registries are responsible for this, but what I am saying is that data used in a way to breed for extreme production creates unsustainable systems. Let's take a look at the milk EPD in beef cattle. I honestly think that many producers who look at this number don't really know what it means, but they're too embarrassed to ask because they're cattlemen, and there's a pride factor there. EPDs, or expected progeny differences, are a comparison of how offspring will perform compared to the breed average. I know this is confusing, but hang with me here. The milk EPD on a bull is projecting how his daughter's milk production will affect the weaning weight of her offspring compared to the breed average. A +10 milk EPD would indicate that his offspring would wean calves that are 10 pounds heavier than breed average, specifically due to milk production. A -10 milk EPD would mean that his offspring would wean calves that are 10 pounds lighter than breed average, specifically due to milk production. If that was a word salad, you are not alone. Essentially, what it means is that a bull with a positive milk EPD would produce daughters with higher than average milk production, while a negative milk EPD would produce daughters with lower than average milk production. Why does this matter? Lactation is nutritionally expensive. Cows that have higher milk production will have higher feed requirements. What is the single most expensive input for most beef cattle producers? Feed. I'm going to say that many producers look at that EPD and never follow it through to the end of what it actually means. Higher milk EPD equals higher feed requirements. Now, if you're in an area where cows are standing in nutrient-dense grass up to their bellies year-round, then it's not a big deal, other than reducing the number of cows you can raise because each cow will eat more. But if you're in a limited feed environment where cows have to travel to graze, or you're feeding supplemental feed in the winter, or both, your costs are going to go up. When I bring this discussion up with ranchers, they always say, "But look at those big calves. They make up for the extra feed." Yes, the calves are bigger, and 20 years ago, heavier calves did bring more, but the cattle feeder figured out that lighter calves perform better for them. So today, you'll get nearly the same dollars per head for a small calf versus a big calf. And I'll bet your breed up is not as good, especially on a dry year, because your cows are too thin from producing all that extra milk. The same scenario tracks for goats too. We just don't have a consistent and reliable number for it yet that makes it easy to compare. Producers who participate in the NSIP program have a metric called maternal weaning weight, which gives a value to weaning weight attributed to milk production plus mothering, which from a production standpoint is possibly more useful as an overall metric compared to the milk EPD. I suppose education is the best way to promote responsible use of all this data collection. How do we stop seeking extremes industry-wide? I don't have the answer to that one. Keeping records is important. How that data is used is just as important. I had a brilliant professor in college who made sure I remembered two things: seek optimums, not maximums, and the closest thing you'll get to a free lunch in beef cattle production is hybrid vigor. That was a long time ago. Both still apply. And they apply to goats as well. Optimum production goals are often set aside and replaced with maximum production goals for a couple of reasons. First, optimums are not easy. You have to take into consideration all factors and figure out the optimum for your environment and resources. The results are often slower to see and usually a compounded effect of several traits instead of just one. It's easier to just seek a maximum like weaning the biggest kids possible. Second, optimums are not flashy and not as brag-worthy. You don't see huge numbers in one specific area, but what you do see is an overall sustainable level of production you can measure in quieter ways: simpler management, healthier animals that fit your environment, less interventions, less disease, less input, less stress, and ultimately, more profit. What about hybrid vigor, also called heterosis? When crossbred offspring outperform the average of their purebred parents, that's called hybrid vigor. You'll see it in growth, fertility, hardiness, and efficiency, but not typically in carcass traits. Pretty cool, huh? This happens because crossbreeding masks harmful recessive genes and introduces more genetic diversity. You get more good gene combinations and less bad ones. Here's a meat goat example. Many breeders will cross Boer with Kiko or Spanish. For our example, we'll use a Boer-Kiko cross. Kikos are hardy and parasite resistant, and Boers are fast-growing and muscular. The Boer-Kiko cross will produce kids that survive better under low input conditions, grow faster to weaning weight, and are less parasite susceptible than either parent line. That makes for some productive and profitable goats. Once you start breeding the crossbred offspring back to each other, the hybrid vigor fades unless you maintain a structured crossbreeding system like a 2 or 3 breed rotation or a terminal cross. Terminal cross is when all resulting offspring are sold for meat and none are retained for breeding. So, We still need purebred animals in our breeding programs to capitalize on hybrid vigor, and registries play a critical role in that. Back to registries. Let's talk about the cost of registering your goats. With the American Dairy Goat Association, ADGA, registration ranges from $15 to $105 depending on the age and sex of the goat and if you're a member or not. The American Boar Goat Association, ABGA, is $25 for members and $50 for non-members per goat. The American Spanish Goat Association is $12.48 per goat, and you have to be a member to register with them. If you have large numbers of goats, this can add up quickly. Another argument I hear sometimes for registering everything is to collect data without having to reinvent the wheel. As a commercial producer, you can meet that need with a spreadsheet that is fully customizable to your operation and what you feel is important to track. My spreadsheet is always a work in progress, but as you can probably tell from our kidding report episodes, I keep track of a lot of data for my own use and for the improvement of our herd. I don't think there's a single registry that has the capacity to track everything that I track for my own herd, nor should they. So I don't see registries as the total record-keeping solution for your goat herd. And finally, the big question, should you raise registered goats or not? Of course, I'm going to answer this with more questions for you. Are you raising purebred goats? Are you raising breeding stock for others? Does your registry's focus align with your goals for your herd? Are registration papers important for your customers who are buying your breeding stock? Do you need help with record keeping? Do you want to show your goats in registry-sanctioned shows? If you answered yes to any of those questions, you might want to consider raising registered goats. However, if you feel like a registry won't get you closer to your goals, if you're raising goats only for your own use, if you're raising crossbred goats, and there's no shame in that, by the way, you may be better off to skip registration altogether. Here's what we do. I consider myself a commercial meat goat producer, and I don't register any of our goats. I could get on board with the American Spanish Goat Registry just for breed conservation purposes, but the cost is prohibitive with the numbers we have. I'm free to crossbreed however I see fit and capitalize on hybrid vigor in the offspring. We are selecting based on multiple traits for overall performance and low maintenance goats, which is a sustainable approach and what my customers want. I've never once been asked if our goats are registered, so it's not important to the folks I'm selling to. I actually do have one registered dairy goat. He's a Nubian buck, but I didn't even know he was registered when I bought him. As far as our dairy animals, I prefer moderate to low milk production to keep inputs lower and metabolic problems non-existent. And since the registries are trending toward high milk production, I've steered away from that. My priority is a sustainable herd that is easy to maintain, produces high-quality offspring that thrive in our environment, and provide top-tier replacement commercial breeding stock to our customers. I know some purebred folks will cringe at that statement. To that I'd say, the industry needs both purebred and commercial producers, and we need each other to optimize our production systems. How do I use the registries? I like to look at what's happening in the industry and see what's out there. In the future, I plan to artificially inseminate the dairy does rather than keep a dairy buck. So I'll be looking at registry data for that, hoping to find semen from old bucks or moderate production lines. I will likely do the same in our meat herd with a slightly different purpose. I plan to use artificial insemination on our top does to raise future herd sires, which will bring in genetic diversity without purchasing a number of new bucks. AI for meat goats is not as common as it is in dairy goats, so it's more expensive, but I think it's a good future option for us, and I'll be checking registries for information on bucks for that. I suppose that sometime in the future, we may purchase some registered Spanish goats to participate in that conservation effort, but I still plan to crossbreed and keep my main herd as commercial meat goats. I hope this episode helps you decide if raising registered or unregistered goats is the right thing for you in your production system. There are a lot of factors to consider, so take your time to think about what a sustainable, long-term solution for your ranch or homestead would look like. If you have any questions, email me, millie@drycreekpastures.com, or come on over to the free community and start a conversation. That's at getgoatwise.com/community. See you next week. Hey there, thanks for listening today. I'm so glad you're here. If this episode helped you or encouraged you in some way, share the link with your homesteading friends. And if you really want to help me out, click on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. You can connect with me on Instagram or email linked in the show notes, and meet me back here soon for more Get Goat Wise.